Welcome to Unit 3 of the TESOL course at Southern Utah University. In this course, we'll take an overview of language teaching methods and focus on three main approaches: grammar translation, audio-lingual method, and communicative language teaching. We'll also finish with describing some common principles that can guide all language teaching. The grammar translation method is an old historical method. It's been used for centuries. And the focus in this method is on grammar structures and vocabulary lists. Really, the interest here is translating written text from one language into another language. So really there's a focus on the form of the language, meaning the grammar and the vocabulary. In such a method, the language is taught using people's native language. The target language is not spoken usually in the classroom. There's no interest in using the language for communication and interaction. It's really just for success is determined by can you take one text and translate it into another text. So in that case, it's a very limited use of this method. Even though a learner might understand the language very well, they really could not use it in a communicative context. The next method, which really came about following the Second World War, and the recognition that language communication was really important, the ability to interact with others from other languages and cultures, is the audio-lingual method. And this method, as you can see in the video there, often took place in language labs. Learners would have headphones and microphone, and they would listen to dialogues in the target language, and they would repeat them back again. So all of the instruction usually took place in the target language, heavy emphasis on oral language, and also a heavy emphasis on habit formation. This took place during the time in which behaviorism, a form of psychology, was very popular in the educational field, and the idea was that if we practice something long enough, it will become automatic and we'll have developed that skill. The maybe disadvantage of this is that we're not teaching learners to really understand the language deeply and to create with it. Instead, we're just helping them develop these habits, get good, clear pronunciation, but they may not be really as competent in being immersed in that language as we think or we hope that they might be. So in response almost to this audio-lingual method, arising especially very strong during the 1980s and onward, was communicative language teaching. And here the emphasis is still on oral language, but the focus is less on accuracy and perfect pronunciation, and it's more on meaningful interactions. Can we use language to accomplish tasks that are useful? Can we become fluent in doing this? One of the drawbacks to this method is that the emphasis is placed more on fluency and meaning and less on accuracy. And so when a learner doesn't know a word or a learner uses grammar that's not considered a standard, the idea is don't worry about it, they'll figure it out eventually. The only problem with this method is that some learners don't figure it out. They really need that explicit instruction. Now, communicative language teaching has developed over time into other forms of language teaching, including task-based language teaching and even project-based language teaching, which are still very popular today. But often this method is supported with greater emphasis on the form of the language, which was often lost during the communicative language teaching era. Regardless of whatever approach is used, and these three are only just a small sample of many different approaches that have been used over time to teach language, all language teaching seems to be focused on what we might consider three primary principles. Now here is one set of names for them: the pre-task stage, a task stage, and a post-task stage. The idea here is that when we want someone to learn language, we prepare them for what they're going to do. We might provide some instruction, we might provide them with some explicit language. Here's some structures that you would use, a mini grammar or pronunciation lesson, and then we guide them through completing the meaningful language task. And then we expect them to use that information after the task and apply it on their own, or we provide them with feedback. So regardless of which approach we're using, we want to be thinking about how do we prepare learners to do something with the language, how do we support them as they do it, and how do we get them to think about applying it and improving it in the future. And those basic principles can be applied to a variety of different language teaching contexts and to a variety of different approaches. So in this video, we've taken a look at three main historical methodological approaches: grammar translation, audio-lingual method, and communicative language teaching. And we talked about these three principles that can guide all language teaching.